students, I welcome you on behalf of Thakur Vidya Mandir High School and Junior College for Remote Teaching Learning Process, where our motto is let learning be a joy and teaching a pleasure. Today, let us begin part 1 of chapter 2, that is sources of corporate finance. Before moving to the first question of chapter number 2, let us have a brief understanding of sources of finance which we have already discussed earlier. As discussed earlier, sources of corporate finance are basically divided into two categories, that is owned capital and borrowed capital. Owned capital comes from selling of shares from the retained earnings, whereas borrowed capital represents the loan capital, which could be by means of selling debentures, by accepting public deposits through ADR GDR, that is American Depository Receipts or Global Depository Receipts, which are useful for raising funds in international markets. Then even borrowed capital can be raised from banks, financial institutions, through trade credit, bonds, etc. Further, shares are further divided into two parts, two categories, that is equity shares and preference shares. Let us move towards the first question of chapter number 2, that is what is share, and state its features. Before moving towards features, we need to understand the meaning of the term share. What is share? Whenever a joint stock company raises capital by means of selling shares to the general public, the total capital of the company which is raised by doing so, it is divided into small parts and each such part is called as share. So accordingly, share is nothing but it is the smallest unit. It is the small unit of the total capital of a joint stock company. So if the meaning of share is asked, the meaning of share is nothing but share represents the small unit of total capital of a company. A person can purchase any number of shares as he wishes. It depends upon his financial ability. There are no restrictions as to the minimum or maximum number of shares. It depends upon the financial ability of a person, and any person who purchases the shares, such a person is called as a shareholder. So if the meaning of share is asked, do include all the 4 points as given in your slide. Let us now move towards features of shares. The first feature is nothing but your meaning, and as discussed, it is nothing but the smallest unit in the total share capital of a joint stock company. So the first feature of share should include the meaning of share, and it is nothing but the smallest unit in the total share capital of a joint stock company. The second feature of share is ownership. Share represents ownership of the shareholder in a joint stock company. Any person who purchases share in a joint stock company, such a person is called as a shareholder, and a shareholder is nothing but he is considered to be the owner in a joint stock company. So shares represents the ownership of shareholder in a joint stock company. The third feature of share is distinctive number. Each and every share that is issued by a joint stock company in physical form, each and every such share has a distinct number for its identification. The term distinct means a separate number for identification. For example, if a shareholder has purchased 100 shares, then in such case each of his shares will be given a separate number, like say 101 to 200 or 401 to 500, so on. It could be any number. Now this number which is given to share, this identification number, this distinct number, it has to be mentioned in share certificate. Whenever the company issues shares in physical form, it gives a document as a proof of title to shares, and that is called a share certificate. This share certificate must include the distinctive number of shares which has been issued to the shareholder. However, if the shares are dematerialized, then in that case the shares are not given distinctive number for its identification. Next, the next feature, the fourth feature, is evidence of title. Shares represent evidence, that is proof of title of ownership to shares. Whenever a company issues shares in physical form, it gives a document which is called a share certificate, and this document acts as a proof of title of ownership of shares. Thus, shares act as an evidence of title to ownership. Let us now move towards the fifth feature, which is value of share. The value of share is always expressed in terms of money, which means that if you want to express share, the value of share, it has to be expressed in monetary terms. This monetary terms includes three factors. The first one is face value. Face value is that value which is written on the face of the share certificate. It is mentioned on the face of the share certificate. Not only that, this face value of share certificate is also mentioned in the memorandum of association of a company. So the first monetary value in which shares are expressed is the face value of shares. The second value includes issue price. It is not at all necessary that the shares are sold at face value. The shares could be sold at a value which is equal to its face value, and then in such a situation it is called as issue of shares at par. But sometimes the shares could be sold at a value which is higher than the face value, and in such a case it is called as issue at premium. And sometimes the shares are issued at a value which is lesser than the face value, and this value is called as issue of shares at discount. So issue price is nothing but the price at which company sells its shares, which could be equal to its face value, higher than the face value, or it could be even lesser than the face value. The third one is market value. Market value is that value which is determined by the demand forces and supply forces existing in the share market. This price is a derived price, and this price is derived through the demand and the supply of the shares of a particular company in the share market. So, value of the shares could be expressed in three ways, that is face value, issue price, and market value. Let us now move towards the sixth feature, which is rights. The shareholders, as discussed earlier, represent owners of the company. The share capital represents ownership capital of the company, and as such, shareholders do enjoy certain rights, which includes: the first one is right to receive dividend. The shareholders enjoy right to receive dividend whenever it is declared by the company. Whenever the company gets net profit, at that time shareholders enjoy the right to receive a part of net profit in the form of dividend. The second right enjoyed by them is to inspect or check statutory books like Register of Members, Register of Debenture Holders, Register of Depositors, and so on. Thirdly, They also enjoy the right to attend shareholders meeting like annual general meeting and extraordinary general meeting, which is arranged by the company to discuss and decide on important matters. Not only that, they also enjoy the right to vote at such shareholders meeting. The next feature of shares is income. Shareholders get a share in the net profit of the company, and this net profit, this share is enjoyed in the form of dividend. Let us now move towards the eighth point, which is transferability. Shares in a public limited company are freely transferable, which means that shareholders of public limited company enjoy the right to sell their shares. However, such transfer must take place as per the provisions, that is the rules and regulations which is given in the Articles of Association. So it can be concluded that if a person owns the shares in a public limited company, he or she can freely transfer, that is sell his or her shares to any other person. However, this transfer should take place as per the rules and the regulations which are laid down in the Articles of Association of Company. The ninth feature is property of shareholder. Shares represent movable property, which means that shares can be carried in the form of share certificate or in the form of dematerialized shares which are held in the demat account. The last and the 10th feature is kinds of shares. As discussed earlier, there are basically two types of shares, that is equity shares and preference shares. So with this, dear students, we complete the features of shares. So let us have a brief view of all the 10 features of shares. The first point is meaning. Next, ownership. Then each share has a distinctive number. It acts as proof or evidence of title to shares. It can be expressed in monetary terms, which includes face value, issue price, and market value. Shareholders being the owners, they enjoy certain rights. They enjoy income in the form of dividend. Shares of public limited company can be freely transferred from one person to another person. Shares represent property of the shareholder, and that too a movable property which can be carried from one place to another place. And finally, there are two types of shares, that is equity shares and preference shares. So with this, we do complete the meaning of shares and features of shares. Thank you, dear children, for your patience listening. See you soon.